It's a driving license. He needs a driving license. It doesn't matter what kind of motor vehicle it is. If it's on land, you need a driving license. That's the answer. So I didn't like the answer, but it's the fact it's the real answer. If it has a motor,
I didn't even know where it
it's
was.
a drive on land, that needs a driving license. Stupid answer, but that's just the way it is.
Hopefully I forgot that. Yes. I just think did I do what form?
Did you do like 38?
38 enough, yes, I did. I'll take my
I like it.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say yes.
Two, three, four.
Bridge gets on the
Garmin.
Oh yeah. I'll be ended up in there.
She said she's where you're going in this
Oh, so I need to get out of
It's Tyler.
Oh, I signed up for Mr. Smith.
Okay, to start off today, I need y'all to find your bookwork, which should be number 9 in your binder. There's a few questions I told you to hold off on asking about last time, so I want to go over all 6 of those, plus whatever other questions you had trouble finishing or trouble getting the correct answer to. So that will be first on our list. Then you guys did have another handout today. Which you should number as number 10. Again, I try to put the number on there before I run off copies, but I do forget about half the time because I've never done that before. I'm trying to do it for the first time this year. And unfortunately, I can't offer this to you all year long, but just like in section 4.1, this worksheet is essentially a practice quiz. So the front of this is roughly what we will expect you to be able to do for your 4.2 quiz, and the back is like a second practice quiz. So once you move over that direction, please make sure you're trying it without your notes and without help from your neighbor to give an honest assessment of where you stand. Asking for a couple of these assignments in Google Classroom, so I'll remind you to do that. And then you'll have some time to review and study for your quiz, which will be next class. All right, so from your bookwork, the questions that I told you to hold off on were 37 through 42. So So I want to start off with those. Now, I guess if you watch the classroom videos on my website and you are good with these, I guess you can just move on to the worksheet, the practice quiz. But I would think most of you guys would be here with us. Okay, and for these first four, I'm going to show you two different ways to work these out. A visual way to do this, and then referring to the even and odd, which is why I had you put this in your notes when we did your notes last time. So the easiest way to do this by far, the quickest way to do the first four of these, is to know which functions are even and which ones are odd. There's two even trig functions, which means the other four are odd. And you have to know what it means to be even and odd. To be even means if you plug in an angle or his opposite of that angle, like 30 or negative 30, you get the same value. Whether you plug in theta or negative theta, they will be equal. But if it's odd, like question 37 is, plugging in theta versus plugging in negative theta is not equal. It's only equal if you multiply one of them by a negative. You change the sign of one of them. So this is one way you could do it, is you could say sine is odd. So the difference between plugging in t versus negative t is that these can't be equal, but they would be equal if I multiply 1 by a negative. So that makes that negative 1/2. Because now if I multiply it by a negative, it equals this, or if I multiply this by a negative, it equals that. To me, that's the easiest one. I changed the sign because sine is odd. But if you want to try to do, well, and then the second half of this question is pretty easy because these two are the same angle, cosecant the reciprocal of sine, so you can just flip that over. But as an alternative, or maybe an extra on your quiz, you might want to do it both ways. We can also try to reason through this visually. It's a little hard because you don't know how big angle t is. But if you force yourself to try to sketch angle t, just give yourself a visual. Sine is the y value. And I want to know what the sign of negative t is. Well, if positive t is turning about this much up, negative t is going to be turning the same amount down. And if I want to know sine of negative t, do you see how this y value, it's the same distance as this one, but in the negative direction, it's going down? That's the second way you can come up with that answer. So even and odd, which you'll need to know for other stuff later, or sketching a picture of t, labeling the sign as a half, sketching negative t, and then just looking at the visual to see that same y length, but going down instead of up. Okay, if we just do the even and odd for the next three, because again, I think that's better long term, but there's nothing wrong with the pictures. I think it helps add some confidence here. But 38 gives us this, and once this and this. So honestly, this can be like a 2-3 second question. Is sine even or odd? Okay, does that mean I keep it the same or change the sign? Change the sign. You can get the same thing with a visual if you set it up correctly though. And then these two, we're talking about the same angle. Cosecant is just the reciprocal of sine, so flip your fraction over. Really, it's usually part A that you need to slow down on. Part B is usually just reciprocal. Okay, and then there's two more of these. So 39. Now it gives us cosine, so the rules might be different. Okay, well, you should be able to do part B fine, because we already know something about negative t. These two are talking about the same angle. Cosine and secant are reciprocals, so that one doesn't really do anything different. Bless you. But for this one, if I was you, I would memorize that cosine is even or odd?
Even.
Even, which means that, does this stay the same, or do I need to multiply by a negative?
Stay the same.
Stays the same. Even, stay the same, odd, switch signs. But again, feel free to do a picture if that helps you. All right, and then 40 is cosine, so I know this is even. Even, they stay the same. So this is negative 3/4, this is negative 3/4. These are the same angle. So there would be 40. So 37 through 40, picture can be okay. Some of them, the picture's a little harder to get set up to see the visual. I really think this is the way to go. And again, we're going to expect you to know, you don't have to memorize this right now, unless this is the only way you can do these questions. But in about a week, I'm going to ask you to memorize these anyway, so it's kind of nice to just be able to use them early. Okay, and then 41 and 42. You cannot just use even and odd. Unfortunately, on these, you really have to practice setting up the picture, which I know is not easy, but that's really the only way to go about it. Now, the most common mistake is that students will try to figure out like sine of negative t, and then they like add pi to their answer or take pi away from their answer. But this should be a ratio. Your answer is a ratio. This is talking about an angle. This is this is what it's equal to, the value, and this is where it happens. So two different things. You should not have pi in your answer over here. So I'm going to try to set up a picture here. Lucas, can you keep your phone put up, please? So I'm going to try to sketch this. I don't know how big angle t is, but I'm going to make it look like it has a sine of 4/5. Sine is the y value. So there's my visual for that. All right, this one says, what's the sine of an angle that's at pi minus t? Well, we know pi is right here, and I've got an estimate of how big t is. So I don't want to go all the way to pi. I want to go to pi, take away how big this one is, which would be about right here. This angle is about pi, take away how big angle t is. And what do you think his y value is? Same as this guy. And the y value gives you the sine. So if you sketch how big you think t looks, it's just an estimate. Pi minus t would be about here. They have the same y value, so they have the same sine value. This is not about even and odd anymore. You have to do the picture. Okay, or we could say, here's angle t. How much should I swing around the circle if I want to add pi radians to that? Okay, so halfway around. So if here's t, if I go halfway around, this angle represents t plus halfway around, t plus pi, and I want to know the sine of that angle. So I want to know the sine, the y value. So what would you guess that to be? Right, however much this one's going up is now how much this one's going down. So negative 4/5. With that visual, it's not going to be some random other number. It's not going to just magically be 8/17. It's going to be similar. And with your picture, it's obvious that this one's positive because it's going up. And that angle, if you sketch it, it's obvious it's going down, so it should be negative. But if you don't practice setting up the pictures, it's pretty hard to do. Now, normally I'd ask you to at least try 42, especially since most of you probably got stuck on 41. But you've got a couple of these practice ones on your practice quiz, so I can do this one as one more example, and then I can take whatever other questions I can help you with. Okay, so try to make a visual of this. Again, we can't just use even and odd here because we're starting at pi and taking away the angle, or starting at the angle and adding pi. It's not just even odd stuff. So we don't know how big t is. We're just going to estimate. We're just going to draw it, something convenient. Now, is this 4/5? Should that be the x value or the y value? X. Cosine is always x. Now, I'm going to try to sketch this angle, and it doesn't have to be perfect. We just need to get it kind of close, and then it should make the answer pretty easy to see. Start at pi, which would be right here, and then take away however big we said angle t is. So not all of pi, but all of pi, take away about how big t is. This is roughly pi minus t. Well, I want the cosine value, so I want the x value. What would your guess be for that? Right, if this one was going right 4/5, now this guy is going left 4/5. Again, it's not some random new numbers. It's really about understanding the direction and where you're headed. Okay, and then last one, I'm going to erase this just for make it a little easier to see. But this one wants an angle of t, which I've already got, plus pi. If 2 pi is all the way around, 1 pi is halfway around. So keep going halfway around. This represents t plus half of a circle, t plus pi. So there's the location, and I want the x value because I'm asked for the cosine. So is it 4/5 or negative 4/5? Right. This one's positive because he's going to the right. This one would be negative because he's going to the left. Yeah.
In what, is there any case where the fraction would flip to be 5/4?
Only if it said like secant.
Okay.
Yeah, if this was, what's the secant of this? You do the exact same work, but then these two would need to be reciprocal, so. Okay, does that help a little bit with 37 through 42? Okay, of course, make sure that you have that down on your book assignment. Easy points, but they all have to be complete. And now, if you would, scan through the rest of your book work and see if there's something you'd like me to help out with. I help with any of those problems from the book assignment. But when someone's not asking a question that you need help with, or if you're already good with all of the book assignment, that's great, but make good use of your class time and try the front side of today's worksheet. Try that practice quiz to see how well prepared you are. Okay, and then for book questions, what do you got?
What is B on 41?
B on 41? It would be negative 4/5, it was down here. Other book questions? Again, I don't mind taking whatever book questions you'll have, but this is why, even though I know I don't necessarily collect the book assignment when I expect you to have it done, if you guys don't have it done and you haven't checked your answers, you don't know what you need help with, which would mean you don't know what questions to ask right now. Which just means you get less help overall, so still important that you have it done on time. Yeah. 54? Okay, 54 wants to know, is the cosine of negative 7 pi over 2 the same thing as the cosine of pi plus pi over 2? Now, there's no quick way to answer this. This is kind of like two different unit circle questions. So, you need to find this location, either by finding an angle that's coterminal to it by adding 2 pi a bunch of times, or I know how much 1 pi over 2 is. So if I go the other direction, I know where negative 1 pi over 2 is. And if I turn that much 7 times, negative 2 pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 2, negative 4 pi over 2, negative 5, 6, 7. So you've got to find that location. Because it's a spot that lands on the unit circle, we have that point memorized. And since it's cosine, I want the x value. So, you okay with why this is 0? Okay. Then completely separately, you've got to do this one. So you could either just add these together to say it's 3 pi over 2, which would be right here. Or you could say pi plus pi over 2, which is still right here. So this one went like this. This one goes like that. Completely different angles. But the cosine of this guy is also 0 because that's his x value. So even though it's completely different locations, they still both equal 0, so I would say true. But there's not a quick way to just glance at that. You actually just have to work each one out. They're trying to get you to see that it can be a completely different spot on the unit circle and still be equal. There's 2 places where cosine is a half. There's 2 places where cosine square root of 2 over 2. There's 2 places where cosine is 0. So those angles certainly are not the same thing, but the cosine of those angles are. All right, last call. Any others on the book assignment? Okay, then let me give you a few minutes to work on your practice quiz to see how it goes. Again, for your sake, you can still go back and finish it up later, but when you do the practice quiz, don't get help from your neighbor. Try not to look at your notes. Try not to look at your unit circle. You're going to be tricking yourself into thinking you're more prepared than you are. Try it without any of that. Check your answers on the website. Learn from your mistakes, and then you can try it one more time on the back page. And just based on how many book questions you guys had, it sounds like you'll have plenty of time to do that. So I do have a few things for you to turn into Google Classroom before Wednesday, so consider doing that before you forget. But I'll remind you of that stuff later. But for now, I'll give you some time to work ahead to see what it is you're going to come up with.
Will they get a calculator?
You will, but there's a catch. You shouldn't have any decimal answers.
Okay.
So
I was just wondering.
I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. But I want people to see if they fall into that trap before I just say it outright. All right, so 10, 15 minutes, and then I'm going to bug you again. So do what you can. I guess I should also add, just because I told you not to just look up the unit circle in your notes, when you take the real quiz next class, there's nothing stopping you from just making a unit circle on the side or on the back page. I guess you don't really have room on the back page. But that's perfectly fine. So if that helps you to just make one big unit circle before you use it a few times, then that's okay too. I don't think you'll do that long term, but certainly acceptable early in the year. one's going, cosine is left or right. This one's going left this much. Between the angle halfway around the circle, now it's going to be right. 8/17 sine. Try to make a picture. T shows going to the left. That would be x. Cosine is x. It's negative. I'm estimating just like this. X value, x is our pressure. And then what do you want? That plus sign or plus pi? Okay, so halfway around. So now it's the same distance, but now it's going to the right. So that one, make sure that you mark that one. Is that one probably not this one? Okay, it's been 10 minutes, so I want to interrupt you for just a moment, just because I want to make sure you guys don't lead down a wrong path here, which does happen to a few students every year, even though I say this. But as you guys work through this practice quiz, we do allow a calculator on this quiz, but it's almost bad. I kind of wish that we would stop letting you use the calculator. Because like question 2, you might think that you're just supposed to go to your calculator and say, what is sine of 11 pi over 6? And you give me a decimal answer. Without me saying this, the reason you should know that that's not okay is because part of this work is checking your answers. And when you check your answers to this practice quiz, there's not going to be any decimals anywhere on here. If you're using your calculator to try to get some of these answers, they will be wrong. If we want you to use a calculator, we'll say use a calculator and round to the nearest thousandths, to the nearest 3 decimal places. However, there is one thing that you can do to be creative. So let's say on 2A, you did that work and you thought the answer was, I don't know, let's say you thought it was square root of 3 over 2. Have we talked about this already? Because it came up in one of my classes. If you think the answer is square root of 3 over 2, how should you know that's wrong? Right, it's supposed to be the exact same thing, right? This is your calculator rounding the answer. This is your calculator rounding what you think the answer is, but these two are obviously different. So there's no way this could be your right answer. So at the very least you would know, hey, I need to try something else. Then maybe you try you do some work, you try -1/2. These two have the same decimal now, so now you can feel comfortable about your answer. So that's my theory on why we let you use a calculator, because if you're smart about it, you can check some of those answers. But again, if you give me decimal answers on your quiz, there's very few points you'll get right. No points for decimal answers. And as long as you're checking your answers online, you should catch that before it's the real quiz. But you guys find stuff I can help you with, just call me up. Okay. With the front and the back?
Yes, sir.
Yes, both. But do the front, check your answers, see what type of questions you're struggling with, try to learn from those, and then try to think. Because at that point, if you're still missing on them, that's a red flag that you're gonna miss them on the report, and you should get some.
Would you use the first one?
Not necessarily.
Let's see when you're wrong.
And then cosine. 30 degrees. Cosine at -30. See how they're the same x value? They're the same. Cosine even, so that would be like an positive number or a negative version, value should be the same. Now, if it was sine, that's an odd function. It's switch, right? So that would be the even odd way to do that. That would be the odd definition for you to do it. That would be the word you're unsure or you want to see if it's not a problem. Okay. Yeah, so why don't you divide these three values? You divide the three values. Okay. You want to come up with that here? But, right there. You take your answers down? Okay, I'm gonna put in a couple more of these homework grades for people who are already turning it in. But if you guys find a question, you don't have to wait for me to come around. You can bring it up to me or you can call me over. Okay, so try to sketch angle T, so I have a negative cosine. Okay, I'm gonna go and measure our angle on this one. Alright. So if that is 2, okay. So then that's the cosine much this one is going left. That's not how much this one's going right. So populate it. Check your answers to the front. You got anything on that list yet? You're skipping all your things, Chris.
I'm going.
Okay. I'm just making sure it's on.
Yeah.
those names on the end of circles, so not only that you're real familiar with, but you can find an angle and determine if it is that 125. And that's going to tell you what angle the same spot as pi over 3. Or if you memorize that this is pi over 6, this is 2 pi over 6. She might go in the opposite direction. So here's either 1 pi over 3, or there's 2 pi over 3, or there's 3, and 4. And unit circle point. The sign pick the x at the sign point. Anybody else got something ready for me to help with?